Judge Sarah Williams sits in her mahogany-lined chambers, reviewing case files while sipping her morning coffee. The steam rises from her personalized mug, a gift from her alma mater bearing the scales of justice. Morning sunlight filters through the Venetian blinds, casting striped shadows across her meticulously organized desk. Her reputation as Millbrook City's most stringent judge isn't something that happened by accident. Over 15 years on the bench, she's cultivated an image of unwavering strictness, believing that harsh sentences serve as effective deterrents. The local papers have dubbed her the Iron Gavel, a nickname she secretly relishes. As she flips through today's docket, her attention fixes on a seemingly routine drug possession case. The defendant's name, Angela Richardson, means nothing to her yet. It's just another file in her stack of morning cases, but something about this one makes her pause. Perhaps it's the defendant's impeccable employment history or the unusual circumstances surrounding the arrest. Her clerk, Thomas, knocks softly before entering with more files. Judge Williams, the Richardson case has been moved to first on the docket. The defendant's public defender requested the change due to childcare constraints. Sarah waves her hand dismissively, already annoyed by what she perceives as special treatment requests. The morning newspapers sit untouched on the corner of her desk. The headline about Mayor Thompson's latest city development project faces downward, its significance still unknown to her. She adjusts her reading glasses and returns to the case file, making notes in her precise handwriting. Her chambers, unlike the warmth of its wood paneling, feels cold and impersonal. The walls are adorned with her credentials: law school diplomas, bar admissions, and various accolades from her time as a prosecutor. A single photo of her own family sits facing her desk, a reminder of what she considers proper social order. The clock strikes 9, and Sarah begins her morning ritual. She straightens her judicial robes, checks her appearance in the full-length mirror, and practices what she calls her bench face, a stern expression she believes commands respect. The heavy gold rings on her fingers catch the light as she adjusts her collar. Outside her chamber doors, she can hear the courthouse coming to life. The shuffle of feet, the murmur of voices, and the distinct sound of the bailiff's keys create the familiar symphony of justice about to be served. Her law clerk returns with the morning's updated schedule, noting that the Richardson case has drawn unusual attention from local media. Any particular reason for the press interest? Sarah asks, her tongue clipped. Nothing specific in the file, Your Honor, Thomas replies, though he hesitates slightly. Though there are some mentions of unusual circumstances regarding medical necessity. Sarah's lips thin into a tight line. In her experience, there's always some excuse, some story, some plea for leniency. She's heard them all over her years on the bench, and they've only served to reinforce her belief in strict sentencing. As she prepares to leave her chambers, she takes one final look at Angela Richardson's file photo. The woman's eyes seem to look back at her with a dignity that Sarah finds almost challenging. She closes the file with a sharp snap, her decision about how to handle this case already crystallizing in her mind. Little does she know, as she strides toward her courtroom with practiced authority, that this seemingly routine Tuesday morning will become a turning point not just in her career, but in the very system she's spent her life upholding. The gavel sits ready at her bench, waiting to fall with a weight far greater than she could imagine. The courtroom falls silent as Angela Richardson steps forward, her hands trembling slightly. The worn leather of her mother's handbag, her lucky charm for important days, creaks softly as she clutches it closer. Every eye in courtroom 307 follows her movement, but her tired gaze remains fixed ahead, maintaining the dignity her grandmother taught her. Her public defender, Mark Reynolds, shuffles through his papers one last time. Despite handling 3 other cases this morning, something about Angela's situation has kept him up at night. The evidence folder in his hands contains more than just medical records and character references. It holds the story of a mother's desperate choice. Angela's navy blue dress, borrowed from her neighbor Mrs. Chen, hangs slightly loose on her frame. The past months of working double shifts at the hospital cafeteria and the local diner have taken their toll, leaving little time for proper meals. Still, she stands straight, channeling the strength she shows her children every morning when she sends them off to school with packed lunches and warm smiles. Judge Williams's steel-gray eyes scan the courtroom from her elevated bench, lingering momentarily on Angela's appearance. The judge's expression remains unreadable as she reviews the charge sheet. Possession of unauthorized prescription medication, a felony under state law. The fluorescent lights above cast harsh shadows across her face, making her appear more severe than usual. Behind Angela, in the gallery's third row, Mrs. Chen clutches her rosary beads. She's watching Angela's 2 children today, just as she has countless times before when medical emergencies with young Marcus required Angela's full attention. The thought of her son's condition makes Angela's heart race, but she forces herself to remain composed. Mark Reynolds rises to speak, his voice steady despite his nervousness. Your Honor, my client, Angela Richardson, stands before you today under exceptional circumstances. He pauses, gathering his thoughts. The manila folder trembles slightly in his grip as he prepares to present evidence of Marcus' rare medical condition. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney James Collins, sits confidently at his table. His perfectly pressed suit and carefully arranged documents project an image of order and authority. He's handled hundreds of drug possession cases, and to him, this one seems straightforward. The law is the law, regardless of circumstances. Angela feels a bead of sweat roll down her back. The courtroom's air conditioning hums overhead, but it does little to calm her nerves. Her mind wanders briefly to Marcus and Marie, imagining them at this moment. Marie probably helping Mrs. Chen make breakfast for her little brother, just as she's learned to do during their mother's early morning shifts. Ms. Richardson, Judge Williams's voice cuts through the air. Do you understand the charges against you? Angela's voice comes out clearer than she expected. Yes, Your Honor. The words carry the weight of sleepless nights spent researching legal terms at the public library after her shifts, trying to understand the system she's now caught in. The morning sun continues its journey across the courtroom's worn wooden floors, casting long shadows that seem to point accusingly at where Angela stands. The American flag behind Judge Williams ripples slightly in the air conditioning's breeze, its stars and stripes a reminder of the justice system's promise of equality. A promise that feels increasingly distant as Angela faces the full weight of the law. Time seems to slow as Judge Williams prepares to begin the proceedings. Angela takes a deep breath, thinking of the birthday cards she pre-wrote for her children, tucked away in Mrs. Chen's keeping, just in case. The real trial is about to begin, and no one in the courtroom suspects how this ordinary case will soon shape the foundations of their city's justice system. The morning sun streams through the courthouse windows, casting a golden glow that contrasts with the tense atmosphere inside. Mrs. Chen rises slowly from her seat, her weathered hands smoothing her simple floral dress as she makes her way to the witness stand. At 72, she's never testified in court before, but her devotion to truth outweighs her nervousness. Mrs. Chen, Mark Reynolds begins gently. How long have you known Ms. Richardson and her family? The elderly woman adjusts her glasses, her voice soft but clear as she recounts 5 years of watching Angela juggle work, childcare, and her son's medical needs from the apartment next door. Every night, I hear her saying to Marcus when his pain is bad. Mrs. Chen testifies, her accent thick with emotion. She never complains, even when she hasn't slept. She comes home from night shift, changes clothes, and goes to day shift, always with a smile for her children. The medical records spread across the defense table tell their own story. Dr. Sarah Patel, Marcus's specialist, approaches the stand next. Her testimony details the rare genetic condition affecting the 8-year-old boy, a disorder causing severe chronic pain that requires specialized medication, one that insurance companies often hesitate to cover. The prescribed medication costs $2,800 per month. Dr. Patel explains, her professional demeanor masking her frustration with the healthcare system. Without it, Marcus experiences debilitating pain episodes that can last for days. Ms. Richardson has never missed an appointment, even though she often has to choose between paying for medicine and buying groceries. Judge Williams maintains her stern expression, but a slight furrow appears between her brows as she reviews the medical documentation. The prosecutor shifts uncomfortably in his chair as Dr. Patel continues describing Marcus's condition in detail, complete with charts showing his pain levels with and without proper medication. Mary's elementary school teacher, Miss Thompson, takes the stand next. She describes how Angela's 12-year-old daughter has maintained honor roll status despite her family's challenges. Mary helps her brother with homework during lunch breaks, she testifies. She told me she wants to become a doctor to help kids like Marcus. The evidence mounts. Angela's spotless employment records, volunteer hours at the local food bank despite her exhausting schedule, and letters from community members describing her as a pillar of support for other struggling families. The prosecutor's attempts to paint her as irresponsible crumble with each new testimony. As the morning progresses, even the courtroom regulars, the clerks, bailiffs, and court reporters who've seen it all, find themselves moved by the portrait emerging of a mother's determination. Angela sits quietly at the defense table, her hands folded in her lap, watching as her daily struggles are laid bare before the court. The crucial piece of evidence comes from Angela's pharmacy records. They show her desperate attempts to work within the system. Applications for patient assistance programs, appeals to insurance companies, and payment plans stretching her modest income to its limits. The alternative medication found in her possession, while unauthorized, contains the same active ingredient as Marcus's prescribed medicine, at 1/10 of the cost. Your Honor, Mark Reynolds concludes, his voice steady with conviction. We've demonstrated that Ms. Richardson's actions, while technically outside the law, were driven by an impossible choice. Watch her child suffer or seek alternative means to obtain necessary medication. This is not a case of criminal intent, but of a healthcare system that forces devoted parents into desperate decisions. The sunlight has shifted now, no longer bright and hopeful, but casting long shadows across the courtroom floor. Judge Williams's expression remains unreadable as she calls for a brief recess before the prosecution's closing arguments. Angela closes her eyes briefly, silently praying that the mountain of evidence showing her character and circumstances will make a difference in what comes next. Judge Williams's gavel strikes with finality as she pronounces the sentence, the sound echoing through the stunned courtroom like a thunderclap. 125 years. The words hang in the air, heavy and surreal. Angela Richardson stands motionless, her mind struggling to process the number that has just redefined her existence. Mark Reynolds' legal pad slips from his fingers, scattering papers across the defense table. His face drains of color as he quickly steadies himself against the wooden railing. In 15 years of criminal defense work, he's never witnessed such a severe sentence for a first-time drug possession charge. Furthermore, Judge Williams continues, her voice cutting through the shocked murmurs. This court finds the defendant's actions particularly egregious given the premeditated nature of acquiring unauthorized medication. She adjusts her glasses, reading from her prepared statement with mechanical precision, as if reciting a grocery list rather than dismantling a family's future. Angela's knees buckle slightly, but she remains standing. The navy blue dress, still carrying Mrs. Chen's lingering scent of lavender detergent, suddenly feels like armor holding her together. Her public defender immediately begins scribbling notes for an appeal, his hand shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. In the gallery, Mrs. Chen's rosary beads clatter to the floor. The elderly woman's soft sobs break the tense silence, each tear carrying the weight of future dinners she'll prepare for 2 children waiting for a mother who won't return. The court reporter's fingers hover over her stenotype machine, as if even she can't believe the words she's meant to record. Your Honor, Mark Reynolds finds his voice, rising quickly. We respectfully request a stay pending immediate appeal. This sentence is grossly disproportionate to both the offense and established precedent. His words tumble out with urgent professionalism, masking the tremor in his voice. Judge Williams waves her hand dismissively. Request denied. Ms. Richardson made a conscious choice to circumvent the law. This sentence sends a clear message about the seriousness of drug-related offenses in our jurisdiction. Her words feel rehearsed, detached from the human drama unfolding before her. The bailiff steps forward, handcuffs ready. The metal catches the afternoon light, throwing harsh reflections across the courtroom walls. Angela's eyes fix on a spot just above Judge Williams's head, where the American flag hangs still and silent, its promise of justice feeling like a distant dream. Assistant District Attorney Collins remains seated, his victory feeling hollow. Even he seems shocked by the severity of the sentence, his earlier confidence replaced by an uncomfortable shifting in his chair. He glances down at his own case notes, avoiding the eyes of others in the courtroom. As the bailiff approaches, Angela finally speaks, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "Your Honor, may I have a moment to leave a message for my children?" The question hangs in the air, heavy with maternal love and desperation. Judge Williams's response is another dismissive wave, denying even this small mercy. The courtroom doors burst open as reporters rush to phone in the story. Their hasty exits create a breeze that stirs the papers on both counsel's tables, sending documents fluttering like fallen leaves. None of them realize they're witnessing not just a miscarriage of justice, but the beginning of a story that will shake their city to its core. Mark Reynolds gathers his scattered papers with determined focus, already mentally drafting his appeal. His hand finds Angela's shoulder, offering a gentle squeeze of reassurance. "This isn't over," he whispers, loud enough only for her to hear. "We'll fight this." What neither of them knows is that help is about to arrive from the most unexpected quarter, the marble halls of City Hall itself. In City Hall's executive office, Mayor James Thompson stands at his floor-to-ceiling windows, admiring the morning skyline he's helped shape over his 3 terms. His coffee cup, adorned with the city seal, rests comfortably in his hand as he prepares for another day of municipal leadership. The morning briefing begins like any other, until it doesn't. Sarah Chen, his trusted assistant of 15 years, enters with the daily reports. Her usual composed demeanor shows subtle cracks, a slight tremor in her hands, an unusual hesitation in her step. "Mr. Mayor," she begins, her voice uncharacteristically soft, "there's something in the court reports you need to see immediately." The coffee cup slips from his fingers as his eyes scan the document, porcelain shattering against the polished marble floor. The sound echoes through the office like a gunshot, but Thompson barely notices. His focus locks onto a single name, Angela Richardson. His daughter's name, printed in stark black and white, followed by a number that makes his blood run cold, 125 years. Called Judge Williams's office, he manages, his voice hoarse. Now, 20 years of carefully maintained distance from his daughter's life crumble in an instant. The political facade he's crafted over decades cracks, revealing the father beneath the mayor's polished exterior. Sarah's fingers fly across her tablet, already 3 steps ahead. "Sir, there's more." She pulls up local news websites, each highlighting the unprecedented severity of the sentence. The mayor's legs feel weak as he lowers himself into his leather chair, the weight of 2 decades of absence pressing down on him. Photos of Angela flood his screen, her booking photo, court appearance snapshots, old social media images showing her with 2 children he's never met. His grandchildren. The reality of what he's missed, what he's allowed to happen, hits him with physical force. The intercom buzzes. "Your Honor, Judge Williams's clerk is on line 1. The mayor stares at the blinking light, his hand hovering over the phone. In this moment, he's not the city's highest official, but a father facing his greatest failure. The political consequences of what he's about to do flash through his mind, then fade away as insignificant. "Cancel my appointments," he instructs Sarah, his voice finding its strength again. "All of them. And get me every case Judge Williams has presided over in the last 5 years. Every single one." Sarah nods, understanding the gravity of what's coming. She's seen this expression before, when he fought for city reform, when he stood against corruption. This is James Thompson preparing for war. He picks up the phone not to call Judge Williams, but to dial a number he's kept in his wallet for 20 years. "Helen, it's James. I need to talk about Angela." His ex-wife's initial shock gives way to tears as he explains the situation. 2 decades of blame and hurt dissolve in the face of their shared concern for their daughter. The morning sun continues its climb over the city skyline, casting long shadows across the mayor's office. On his desk, family photos face downward, carefully curated images of political success that suddenly seem hollow. In their place, his computer screen shows Angela's face, her eyes reflecting a strength he recognizes from her mother. A determined calm settles over Mayor Thompson as he begins to plan. His political career, his carefully maintained image, his relationships with the city's power players, all of it becomes secondary to a single goal. The system he's been part of has hurt his daughter, and now he'll use every tool at his disposal to fight back. The broken coffee cup lies forgotten on the floor, its contents spreading like the ripples of change about to sweep through the city's justice system. The mayor's office transforms into a command center as Thompson's team uncovers a disturbing pattern in Judge Williams's previous rulings. Computer screens glow late into the night, displaying spreadsheets, case files, and statistical analyses. The evidence they're compiling tells a story more troubling than anyone initially suspected. Lisa Martinez, the city's lead data analyst, stands before Mayor Thompson with a laser pointer, highlighting trends that make her voice quiver with controlled anger. Over the past 5 years, Judge Williams's sentencing shows a clear disparity. Similar offenses, drastically different outcomes based on demographic factors. Her presentation slides show stark graphs and charts that can't be explained away by coincidence. Local reporters, initially drawn by the unusual severity of Angela's sentence, now camp outside the courthouse steps. Jennifer Wu, a veteran investigative journalist from the City Times, pieces together similar cases that paint a troubling picture. Her desk is covered with testimonies from families affected by Williams's harsh sentencing, each story adding another piece to the puzzle. "Mr. Mayor," Jennifer calls, catching Thompson as he enters City Hall. "Our investigation has uncovered 47 cases with sentencing disparities. Would you care to comment?" The question hangs in the air as camera lights flash. Thompson pauses, his response measured but firm. "The city administrator's office is conducting a thorough review of our judicial practices," he announces, each word carefully chosen. "We are committed to ensuring equal justice under law for every citizen." The statement makes headlines, but it's what happens behind closed doors that truly sets change in motion. Judge Williams sits in her chambers, unaware of the gathering storm. Her clerk, Thomas, enters with a stack of media requests and a worried expression. "Your Honor, the mayor's office has requested all case files from the past 5 years. He hesitates before adding, "They're citing Administrative Oversight Authority." The judge's perfectly maintained facade shows its first crack, a slight tightening around her eyes, a barely perceptible tremor in her hand as she reaches for her reading glasses. "Routine review, unsure," she responds, but her voice lacks its usual certainty. In the City Records Department, archivists work overtime, digitizing decades of court transcripts. Each document reveals a pattern. First-time offenders receiving maximum sentences, plea deals rejected without cause, bail amounts set impossibly high. The numbers tell a story that can no longer be ignored. Sarah Chen coordinates with legal experts from 3 prestigious universities, their analysis confirming what the raw data suggests. The statistical probability of these sentencing patterns occurring by chance, one professor notes, is less than 1 in 10 million. The courthouse hallways buzz with whispers as employees begin to speak up. A former clerk shares emails showing questionable ex parte communications. A court reporter produces transcripts highlighting patterns of dismissive treatment. The wall of silence surrounding Judge Williams' courtroom begins to crumble. Mayor Thompson stands at his office window again, but this time he's not admiring the view. In his hands, he holds a photograph of Angela at her high school graduation, the last time he saw her. Behind him, his team continues their work, building a case that will challenge not just one judge's decisions, but the entire system that allowed such injustice to flourish. Sir, Sarah Chen interrupts his thoughts. The State Judicial Review Board has agreed to expedite their investigation. She pauses, then adds softly, and Mrs. Chen called. She's bringing the children to visit Angela tomorrow. Thompson nods, turning back to the sprawling city before him. The same system he served for years now stands revealed in a harsh new light. But as the sun sets over the courthouse dome, casting long shadows across the city, he feels something he hasn't experienced in years: the fierce protective love of a father, combined with the power to make real change. News helicopters circle above the courthouse as Mayor James Thompson makes his unexpected appearance at Angela's appeal hearing. The morning air buzzes with anticipation, and camera crews jostle for position on the courthouse steps. Inside, the appellate courtroom fills with spectators, journalists, and legal observers, all drawn by the unprecedented nature of the case. Thompson adjusts his tie, a subtle gesture that betrays his nervousness. This isn't the first time he's addressed a packed courtroom, but it's the first time he's done so as both a mayor and a father. His presence sends ripples through the gathered crowd, turning heads and sparking whispers among the assembled attorneys. The three-judge appellate panel enters, their robes swishing against the polished wooden benches. Chief Judge Eleanor Martinez, known for her meticulous attention to legal precedent, sits center, flanked by Judges Chen and Harris. Their expressions remain neutral, but their eyes follow Mayor Thompson's movement with interest. Judge Williams sits in the gallery, her usual confidence noticeably diminished. Her perfectly styled hair and pressed robes can't hide the slight tremor in her hands as she clutches her leather portfolio. The evidence against her judicial conduct has grown too substantial to ignore, and today's hearing carries implications far beyond Angela's case. Mark Reynolds rises to present the appeal, his voice steady and clear. Your Honors, we stand before you today with evidence of not just a disproportionate sentence, but a pattern of judicial misconduct that challenges the very foundation of equal justice. Behind him, Angela sits between two corrections officers, her shoulders straight despite the weight of her shackles. The mayor's data analysis team has prepared a compelling presentation. Graphs and statistics flash across the courtroom's digital displays, showing undeniable patterns in Judge Williams's sentencing history. Each number, each percentage, each disparity tells a story of justice applied unequally. Chief Judge Martinez leans forward, her reading glasses perched on the edge of her nose. Mr. Mayor, she addresses Thompson directly. The court recognizes you not as a city official today, but as a character witness and interested party. Would you like to make a statement? Thompson rises slowly, his prepared speech forgotten as he looks at his daughter. 20 years of absence dissolve in this moment. Your Honors, he begins, his voice thick with emotion. I stand before you today having failed twice. First, as a father who let pride and circumstance separate him from his child. Second, as a city leader who allowed injustice to flourish under his watch. The courtroom falls silent as Thompson continues, describing not just Angela's case, but the systemic issues it has exposed. He speaks of other families torn apart by disproportionate sentences, of lives derailed by judicial bias, of a system that lost sight of its fundamental purpose: justice. Judge Williams's face grows paler with each word, each revelation. Her legacy, built over decades on the bench, unravels in real time before her peers and the public. The evidence against her isn't just about numbers and statistics, it's about human lives affected by her decisions. As Thompson concludes his statement, Angela raises her eyes to meet his for the first time in 20 years. In that look passes decades of hurt, confusion, and a glimmer of something new: hope. The world's cameras capture this moment, this silent exchange between father and daughter, symbolic of both personal and systemic healing. Chief Judge Martinez calls for a brief recess to review the final pieces of evidence. As the courtroom slowly empties, Thompson remains standing, his gaze fixed on the spot where Angela sat. He knows that regardless of today's outcome, nothing will ever be the same, not for his family, not for Judge Williams, and not for the city's justice system. The appeals court chamber shimmers with anticipation as Chief Judge Martinez returns to deliver the verdict. Sunlight streams through the tall windows, casting a warm glow across the packed courtroom. Every seat is filled, with reporters lining the back wall, their pens poised over notepads like archers ready to release their arrows. Judge Williams sits rigidly in the front row, watching her 15-year judicial legacy balance on a knife's edge. Her perfectly maintained facade shows hairline cracks, a slight tremor in her clasped hands, a tightness around her eyes that speaks of sleepless nights and growing uncertainty. In the matter of Richardson versus the state, Chief Judge Martinez begins, her voice carrying to every corner of the hushed room. This court finds clear and compelling evidence of judicial misconduct and disproportionate sentencing. The words fall like heavy stones into still water, sending ripples through the assembled crowd. Angela, seated between her attorneys, closes her eyes briefly as the decision continues. The appeal isn't just overturning her sentence, it's validating a truth she's known since that fateful day in Judge Williams' courtroom. Behind her, Mrs. Chen clutches her ever-present rosary beads, tears flowing freely down her weathered cheeks. Mayor Thompson stands as the final words are read, his posture straight but his eyes glistening. The decision is comprehensive. Angela's immediate release, a complete review of all cases presided over by Judge Williams, and recommendations for systemic reform in the city's judicial system. Later that afternoon, in a small coffee shop across from the courthouse, Angela and her father sit across from each other. Steam rises from their untouched cups, 20 years of silence condensing into this moment. The media crews wait outside, held at bay by Sarah Chen's firm instructions to give the family privacy. "Marcus has your smile," Angela says softly, sliding a school photo across the table. Mayor Thompson's hand trembles slightly as he picks up the image of his grandson. "And Marie," she continues, sharing another photo, "she has Mom's determination." Through the coffee shop window, they can see Judge Williams exiting the courthouse for the last time, her resignation effective immediately. She looks smaller somehow, stripped of the power she wielded so carelessly. The photographer's flashes capture her descent, but Angela and her father barely notice, absorbed in their own reconciliation. "I have so much to make up for," Thompson admits, his mayoral polish giving way to simple fatherly regret. Angela reaches across the table, taking his hand in hers, a bridge across 2 decades of absence. "We all have time now," she responds, the words carrying the weight of forgiveness and possibility. Outside, the city continues its eternal rhythm, but something has shifted. The courthouse, standing proud against the afternoon sky, feels different. Reform committees are already forming, case reviews being scheduled, and systemic changes taking root. Judge Williams' downfall becomes a catalyst for transformation, a reminder that justice must be both blind and balanced. Mrs. Chen waits at home, preparing a celebration dinner for Angela's return. Marcus and Marie help set the table, adding an extra place, setting when their mother calls to say Grandpa will be joining them. The apartment fills with the scent of healing and hope, carried on the steam of Mrs. Chen's famous dumplings. As evening settles over the city, Mayor Thompson and Angela walk together toward home. Their shadows, cast long by the setting sun, merge and separate with each step, like their lives, finding a new rhythm after years of separation. Behind them, the courthouse stands as a testament to change, its facade glowing gold in the dying light, promising a new era of justice for all who seek it within its walls. The story continues beyond these final moments, in every courtroom where fairness prevails, in every family rebuilding broken bridges, and in every heart brave enough to stand up and demand that justice be truly just.